Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we begin our study of chapter 21. We are studying the book of Shmuel Aleph, that is the first book of Samuel. And we just finished the last chapter with the sad and moving separation and departure of David from his very dear friend Jonathan, David from Yonatan. And it has now been made clear to Jonathan and to David and everyone that as Saul was going to do everything he could to execute and kill David, and there was no possibility for reconciliation anymore. So David ran away, Vayokam, Vayelach, this is the first verse, and he got up and he went. In other words, David left Yonatan Baha'ir, and Jonathan went back to the city where his father had his capital. Vayovo David Novet, and David came. He came to the place called Nov, the city called Nov. El Achimelech HaKohen, to Achimelech the Kohen, the priest, who may. Whether he would have been a high priest then, or just a priest that lived in Nov, is not clear, but he was clearly one of the leaders of the town. This town was a town where priests lived, and the verses don't make it clear exactly what was going on at Nov. Another thing that's unclear from the text in general is, we know that Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle, the Mishkan, had been standing throughout most of the period of time from the entry into the land of Israel until throughout the times of the judges for hundreds of years, we know that was no longer in existence, that after Eli and his sons corrupted it, we know that Shiloh was gone. But exactly where the tabernacle stood, if it stood anywhere, is unclear at this point. At least from the verses, it's unclear. And one of the possibilities that seems the most logical is that there was no central tabernacle at this point, but there were places where worship was taking place, where bamot, where altars to God were set up. And it seems like in this place, Nov was a place where they didn't just have an altar for sacrifices, but they were also doing some of the services that would take place in the Mishkan, simply to keep the practices going so that they shouldn't fall away, and that eventually a central place would be set up. Understanding it this way will help us understand several difficulties that we're about to encounter. So let's do that. So Vayomer David, So David came to Nov, to the place where Achimelech the Kohen was the leader. Vayecharad Achimelech, and Achimelech came out. Yecharad could mean from charada, from being trembling, afraid. He came out, concerned and quickly in order to Lekrat David, to greet David. Now, of course, at this point in this town, they didn't yet know that David was on Saul's hit list, and as far as they knew, David was the chief of staff, so to speak, in Saul's household. So if David is coming to town, something serious is going down. So Achimelech came quickly to greet him. Vayomer lo, and he said to him, Matua atol levatecha, and immediately he noticed that David is coming alone by himself, which is very unusual for a royal, such a high figure in the royal house, to come without an entourage, without the soldiers that usually go with him. So why are you alone? V'ish eini tachin, there's nobody with you. So Vayomer David, and David, of course, at this point is not going to reveal that he's running away from Saul, because then they may capture him and deliver him to Saul. So David has to say something else. Vayomer David la'Achimelech HaKohen. So David says to Achimelech the priest, Hamelech tzivani davar. The king commanded me about something. In other words, he's not telling him what, some kind of top secret mission. Vayomer Elai, and he told me, Ish al yeda me'uma es hadavar asher anochi sholechacha v'asher tzivisicha. No one can know. You're not allowed to tell anyone anything about this mission that I'm sending you on and that which I'm telling you to do. Biet hana'arim yodati et makom ploni almoni. And my boys, my troops that are going to be joining me on this mission, I directed them to meet me at such and such a place. It would seem that David may have said this. In other words, because I don't, it's not, it's the most logical thing is that David said these words, Ploni Almoni, such and such place. In other words, I told my boys where to meet me, but since it's a secret, I'm not telling you anything about it, and I'm not even telling you where I'm going to meet them. So, but I need some provisions. I need supplies. Viata, and now, my yesh tachas yodcha. What do you have? Chamisha lechem. I need 5 loaves to nobiadi ohanimsa. Let me have five loaves of bread or whatever you can find. I need food for the way, something to give my boys on this mission that we're going on. So the Kohen answered David, Vayomer, he said, Ein lechem chol. We don't have any ordinary bread, meaning bread which is not holy or consecrated, right? Tachas yadi. I don't have any of that in my possession now. Ki im lechem kodesh. The only bread I have is holy bread. Yesh. That's all that I have. However, the boys that you're getting this bread for, to give them to eat, it has to be that they have not been with a woman, because if someone is with the woman and he had an emission of semen, then that would make him tameh, that would make him impure, and he wouldn't be allowed to eat the holy bread, similar to what we read in the last chapter with Saul, why he thought David didn't show up the first time, that he may not have been pure, may not have been able to eat of the holy food. Now, this immediately brings up several questions, because if one assumes that this bread is bread that was consecrated and to the Beit HaMikdash, and we'll find out soon that this bread was the lechem hapanim, which is the bread that was brought and put on the showbread that was put on the shulchan, on the table in the holy part of the temple, and in this case in the tabernacle in the Mishkan, then David, as a non-Kohen, non-priest, would be not allowed to eat it at all. So exactly what is it that he's giving to David? So the best understanding that I've understood, which that made the most sense that I've heard, as various commentaries explain, that this may not have been the real lechem hapanim, the real showbread, because there was no tabernacle at this time. But in Nov, they were maintaining some of the traditions in order to maintain the tradition of the showbread, not actually in the tabernacle, so that that practice wouldn't be forgotten, so that eventually, when a central place of worship was established, they would just continue that practice. So therefore, since it wasn't the real showbread, a non-Kohen, a non-priest would be allowed to eat it, and the non-Kohen. However, they did continue the practice of eating it in purity, and therefore, which we saw even at the king's table, they kept that practice. So therefore, he said, to eat from this holy bread, you'd have to stay away from women. Vayan David et HaKohen. So David answered the Kohen, Vayomer lo, and he said as follows to him: Ki im isha atzura lanu kitmol shalshom. We stayed away from women from, just like we always have in the past, like yesterday and the day before. But since we left, whenever we left out on a mission, we always did that. Vayu klei hana'arim kodesh, and the vessels that they are using, in other words, to eat with, are also kodesh, are also holy. V'hu derech chol, and therefore v'afki hayom yikdash bakeli, and then even if we're going on a derech chol, on a mission that doesn't involve holiness necessarily, we always kept the vessels holy, and now all the more so they definitely can go with holy food that's consecrated, and it can be kept in the vessels that they have. So therefore, the vessels that they have are holy and pure, and they are holy and pure. And this is a practice that we always kept, and therefore there shouldn't be any problem with the bread. Vayitin lo hakohen kodesh. So therefore the kohen gave him the holy food. Ki lo haya sham lechem, because the only bread that they have was kim lechem aponim, was the showbread, right? Hamusarim lifnei Adonai, which were taken from the table of God. Lasum lechem chom biyom hilakcho, that they would take it away each week in order to replace it with hot bread when it was taken. As soon as the 1 week's bread was taken away, it would be replaced with the next week's bread. V'sham ish me'avdei Shaul, and while this was happening, one of Saul's servants, Bayomahu, he was there, Ne'etzar lifnei Adonai, he was held up before God. So it would seem like that there was some sort of a Mishkan, some sort of a tabernacle there in the city of Nov at this time. And Ne'etzar, it sounds like he was being held there for some reason. Ushmo, and his name was Doeg Ha'adomi, Doeg the Edomite, and he was an official in Saul's administration. Abir Haroim Asher L'Shaul, he was the strongest of the shepherds, is the literal translation of Abir Haroim. Roim doesn't always mean shepherds, though. Roim often means leaders. So Abir Haroim might mean he was the strong man among the Roim, among Saul's leaders in his administration. So he would sound like some kind of a guy who was an enforcer of some sort. It could be another possible translation of Abir Haroim, and that kind of fits a little more in the context of what we're going to hear him do. And this Ne'etzar, him being detained there, might have been there for some sort of purpose, some sort of intelligence gathering purpose. Anyway, Vayomer David la'Achimelech. And David said to Achimelech, "V'in yesh po tachas yodcho chanis o charev." Do you have here any kind of weapon? Do you have a spear or a sword? Ki gam charbi v'gam kelai, because my sword. Remember, David was hiding in the field and he ran. He never had a chance to go home or to go to the palace and get his equipment. So my sword v'gam kelai and all of my items, my weapons, lo lakachti biyadi, I didn't take with me. Ki hayad dvar hamelach nochutz, because this mission that I'm going on for the king was extremely important and I needed to get on the road right away. So Vayomer HaKohen, so the Kohen answered, Cherev Goliath HaPlishti, that sword that belonged to the Philistine Goliath, right? Asher Hikisa Ba'emek Ha'ela, that same giant Goliath that you struck down in the valley of Elah, Hinehi, behold, she is right here, Luta Vasimla Achrei Ephod. It is wrapped in a cloak behind the ephod. The ephod is the garment, the breastplate, right? Which was is a garment which was worn by the high priest, and the ephod was a symbol of the worship of God. It was also used as a symbol in worship of other gods, and not God with the capital G, but in this case, this was the ephod that was stored there, and it was used as part of the ritual of worship. So again, this sounds a lot like Nov was a center of worship. It wasn't just a place where they happened to have an altar, and also the very fact that they were keeping this relic, so to speak, the sword with which Goliath was killed, would seem that this was a special town. Im osa tikach lecha kach. That if you want to take that one, then go ahead and take it. Ki ein acher zulasa bazeh, because in this place we don't have any other weapons. We're not a place of war. We don't. That's the only weapon we have, and that's more of a symbolic item of importance. And so you can take that. Vayomer David ein kamoa tenenali. There's nothing like that one. Let me have that one. Oh, that's such a good special sword. I'll take that one. Vayakam David, and David got up. Vayivrach bayomahu mipnei Shaul, and he ran that day from before Shaul. He now has a weapon, and he has 5 loaves of bread to keep him going while he's running. Vayavo el Achish melech Gath. And where did he go? he went to the place where the city of Gath, where Achish was the king of Gath. That's where he came. Gath is a Philistine city. And ironically, David is running with the sword of the Philistine that he killed into enemy territory. But at this point, he didn't have a choice. He had to run to enemy territory because Saul was after him. So this would get him out of the reach of the king if he remains under the protection of the people of Gath. However, there he's also going to be in danger too, as we'll find out in a minute. So the servants of Achish said to Achish, "Halo zed David melech haaretz." Here, look, this is David, the king of the land. It's fascinating that they were already saying, "This is David, the king of the land," because this makes it clear that it was obvious to everyone in the area, even among the other nations and the other countries that surrounded the people of Israel. It was clear that David was not just a high up in the hierarchy of Saul's government, but that he was someone who they're already calling a king. So they already can see that he was destined to be a leader, and in their minds, still a leader. Isn't this is the one that they were singing about when they were dancing over their victory over us? They were singing about him. Hikasha ol balafov. Saul kills in his thousands, v'David b'rivosav, and David killed in his tens of thousands. So, in other words, he's the king. He's our enemy. He's the one that they're singing about and praising how many Philistines he killed. So David now is, of course, afraid for his life. And David thought about these issues in his heart. In other words, he was very nervous about them. And he was afraid because of the king Achish, the king of Gath. He was afraid of him. So he changed his way of behaving in their eyes. In other words, instead of acting like a normal person, vayisholel biadam, he went crazy. Vayisholel, he started partying, but not in a crazy way in front of them for them. Vayitav al dalsol sashar, and he started drawing marks all over the doors of the and the gates of the city. Vayored riro al zakano, and he drooled all over his beard. So he started acting nuts. He acted like a drunk, like a crazy person. Vayomer Achish al avadav. So Achish said to his servants, "Hinei tiru ish mishtageh." Look, you're telling me he's David the king, and meanwhile he's a crazy man. Lama tavihu so I lie. What are you bringing him in front of me for? I don't need to deal with him. Chasar mishuga imani. Do I have not enough crazy people in my kingdom to deal with? Ki Vesam said that you're bringing him here lishtageh just to be crazy for me. Hazeh yavo el beisi. This is the one I should bring to my house. In other words, I'm not interested in him. Keep him away from me. And this is how David saved himself from being brought before Achish, in which case he may have ended. So it seems like it's that David acted crazy. So because then he's not a threat, right? Achish, if David was the king of the enemy, or at least a leader, a general of the enemy, then he's a threat. And the king, you never know what he might decide to do with him. But if he's a crazy nut, then he's not a threat, and Achish had better things to do with his time. So this is the conclusion of chapter 21. We now leave David in the land of the enemies in Gath, the city of Gath, acting like a crazy person to keep himself safe. And this is the beginning. This is the first stop. Well, actually, the second stop. We had two stops. The one, David in Nov, where he got the sword of Goliath and got some food for the way. And then he ended up in Gath. And we'll see further where he wanders as we go to the next chapter. Thank you so much for studying chapter 21 together. Looking forward to studying the next chapter and, of course, the entire book of Samuel.